All right, everyone, the RS giveaway has a few more days left. So go to obsessedgarage.com, click on the banner image, or find the giveaway section on the site. We'll put the link in the description here, and buy some stuff. Every dollar you spend gets you an entry, and somebody is going to have this car in their driveway or their garage here pretty soon. So you can be anywhere in the United States, all 50 states, every province in Canada except for Quebec. Sorry, your rules are a little weird there, so legally we can't do it, but I'm hoping somebody in Florida wins, that way I don't have to ship it really far, but it could be anybody. So I think someone in Canada's due, so make sure you get your entries in and enter a chance to win the car. So today I wanted to tell the story of, I've done 40 different exhaust installs on GT3s, it seems, on my car, on other people's cars, and so I thought we'd do this one a little differently. I wanted to tell the story. I would argue that a large percentage or a large reason why Obsessed Garage exists is because of my obsession with chasing Dundon exhaust on a GT3. If you go back to 2014 when I got my my Sapphire, is it Sapphire Blue? Yeah, I've already forgotten the name of it. The Sapphire Blue GT3 that I got, the 991.1 2014. I had gotten that car and I'd just come off of the Carrera S. So I had the 991.1 Carrera S, which when you press the button, the exhaust valves opened and they stayed open. When you press the button again and you turn it off, then the valves closed, and then they would transition open, as you've gone on the throttle. But generally, you press the button and the exhaust valves would open, and I just left them open all the time. And so that car had an AWE exhaust. It was awesome. It had factory headers, factory cats, and just the AWE, which was super nasty, no drone, and I didn't have to deal with any valve transitions. And so I was really shocked when I'd gotten the Sapphire GT3 because it was totally different. First issue is you hear all the crunching and you hear the clutches engaging and disengaging. You hear the things sitting there banging and clanging when you're sitting there not even driving the car. And if you press the button on the PSC button, the Porsche Sport Exhaust button, you press the button when you're sitting there at a stoplight or you're sitting there in your garage, the valves open. But as soon as you back up or drive forward, the valves close, and then at around high 3,000, low 4,000 RPM range, depending on your throttle input, the valves would reopen again. It was very pronounced, very, very annoying. I just was shocked. I didn't know that was a thing. There wasn't a lot of stuff or a lot of videos and stuff available on the 991 when I got it. And the 997 did the same thing. I think the 996s did the same thing, but I didn't know that on the GT3. I thought you press the button and the valves open. And so that led me down a path of, it was a really, really long process, but it led me down a path of, I believe I had 15 different exhaust iterations. I think I had the rear bumper off of that car 9 different times, and the rear bumper cover and all the heat shielding in order to pursue and find the best exhaust. So it started with the bypass stuff. So I started with SharkWorks was the first bypass I did, and then I experimented with valves connected, disconnected, and so. Actually, if I think about it, I think I started with valves disconnected and reconnected with the stock exhaust, which was fine. I found that I got a little bit of drone, if I remember correctly, with the stock system. But then with the SharkWorks, it was a nice combination. You disconnected the vacuum line on the valve. Of course, the button doesn't really do anything anyway, and so you disconnect and you end up with a nice, smooth-sounding exhaust. The SharkWorks is essentially just the center section. It takes the center muffler out, puts just basically a straight piping or straight tubing, so there's the small section that comes off the side mufflers, and then the larger, wider, roughly 2 and 3/4 inch section, and then comes out the pipes. And that was and still is a good option, but I just didn't buy that was going to be our solution. It was. It was the same exhaust piece from a 997. So GMG, Sharkworks, Chris Smith Racing, now there are hundreds of them, but it seems there's tons of different versions of it. But there were those three main companies that were making a center bypass. All had a little bit of different tonal characteristic differences. I tried them all, but the problem was they were just bolted on from a 997, and a 991 is a different engine, different car. So I did this. I did the valves disconnected, reconnected. I did the Sharkworks version with just the Sharkworks, and then I tested it with the Sharkworks and then disconnecting the valves. And then I did the GMG. GMG was a little deeper, a little throatier, a little bit louder. The GMG tended to drone with the valves disconnected. So then I was kind of back and forth. Is the Sharkworks better? Is the GMG better? Because the GMG, in order to really work well, you needed to keep the valves connected. And then I did the Butthole, which was the Chris Smith Racing, which was the single exit. I tried that. And so those were the first sort of 3 or 4 or 5 iterations of trying valves disconnected, reconnected, and all that. The other thing that was very commonly, it was sort of common, and it's a misconception, but on the GT3 forum on Renlist and 6-speed, everybody kept saying, well, you've got to have the valves because you'll lose power, right? You need the back pressure. It's a naturally aspirated engine, so there has to be valve operation, otherwise you end up losing power. The other myth was that the button, when you press the button, that the car would make more power. I didn't believe that. I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense. So I went down to Titan Motorsports, we tested it. I did a whole write-up on the thing, on testing the difference between PSE on and off. And then the argument was, well, it's only under moderate throttle that matters. So then I did it under moderate throttle and even like 25% throttle. 50% throttle, tried it at wide open throttle, went to red line, went to 5,000 RPMs, tried all different versions, and the conclusion was, in looking at the dyno charts and laying them over on top of one another, the sole purpose of the button and the valves is simply to reduce drone and to deal with sound regulations in Europe. People still don't believe me, but I've frickin' tested it. I'm telling you that the point of the valves is really, we found that if you get any sort of amplitude out of the exhaust, like with the GMG center section, you end up with a bunch of drone without them. So you really need that option. The whole button on and off is kind of dumb. It's almost like they already had it in the Carrera, so they just left it, because that's the other misconception, is that when you press the button that you get something more out of the car. You don't. It doesn't have anything other than just engaging the vacuum, the vacuum system. So, because I was concerned that, well, you press the button and maybe it makes some more horsepower because you press the sport button on the 997 and you do make a little bit more horsepower. The car then changes the timing and some other things in the car to get more horsepower out of it, as well as opening the valves. But still, 997, you take the car, you press the button, you drive off the line, and the valves close, and then they reopen again. You have this opening, closing, which I find to be really annoying. And it's very pronounced when you have a center bypass. It's very pronounced when you have a stock exhaust. So then I called FVD. FVD works with M&M. M&M is the manufacturer in Germany. So FVD Brombacher is, I believe, has a U.S. distribution here. So I started working with them. They said, look, M&M will make you whatever exhaust you want. And so then I embarked on 6 or 7 different iterations with them. We did stock center section, side muffler delete. And then I tried, stock side mufflers with a different center section. And then I tried aftermarket center section with different side mufflers. And I tried with valves and without valves. And I tried all these different versions. They all were terrible. None of them really worked, because they were just welding some pipes together, using some of their experience on 911s in the past. But they were really doing a whole heck of a lot of testing on it. They were jig manufacturing it, bringing it over. I spent probably $10,000 or $12,000 on these various exhausts. But what I would try, the advantage I had is I'd try it, and then someone would buy it. Someone who didn't care so much about the sound, they were just looking for the power. I didn't do a lot of dyno testing on that. I don't know that I did much at all, because almost all of them either droned or just sounded terrible. Just wasn't a viable option. But all of those included leaving the stock headers, because the common common lore was that you could not make any more power. So don't even mess with the headers. You're taking the cats off, you're just asking for problems. And so I was probably, so this is late 2014, I'm doing this, into 2015. I don't know the exact date that I saw a post in the Renlist group, but it was a post from Charles Dundon. And Charles had talked about scavenging, harmonic tuning, all this mechanical engineering, all this science is dropping on the forum. And I was really intrigued, because it seemed that although FAD was making some stuff for me, they weren't really doing any significant development. My friends at AWE just didn't think there was enough cars to make it worthwhile to make an exhaust at the time. It seemed all the manufacturers. You had Sharkworks, which does amazing tuning, GMG, which does amazing parts. Chris Smith had done a lot of research and a lot of testing on 996s and 997s, but it just didn't seem like anybody was taking a 991 car and developing. This, again, was very early on. Now we have 100 different exhausts to choose from. But these guys were talking about, it was James Bopp and Charles Dundon, and they were talking about the possibility of making power. They had done so on the 997, but very underground. Charles had done some stuff on his own, but they hadn't started the company. So they started this company and were talking about doing some tuning and doing full service on GT3s and only servicing GT cars. I was really intrigued by that. And so they had been following along on my escapades, as pretty much everyone was on Renlist at the time. That's kind of how this YouTube channel started, was I made it so that I could chronicle these things. Shoot, I have some pictures of Kate as an infant. So this, she's about to turn 9. So this is quite a few years ago. Of me putting the Dundon exhaust on the car. So I called, I private messaged Charles and I said, here's what I've learned. And I called and talked to him for about 2.5 hours. He did most of the talking, I did most of the listening. And he talked about how much work they had done. They had bought a Dynapack, so they were doing dyno runs over and over and over. And I don't know if it was Jamie's car, but it was either that or a customer's car that had done hundreds, if not over 1,000 dyno runs while they welded up a bunch of pipes and tried to figure out how to make an exhaust that would, one, sound good, two, would not have a nasty or really annoying valve transition and different size piping, and then doing some calculations on how could they scavenge or how could they get the exhaust velocity to come out of the engine quicker. And so the problem I had is that I'd already spent so much darn money. I was so deep into this. I'd bought all these other exhausts. Now when I'd buy them and try them, I would then sell them, but every time I sold them, I would lose a bunch of money. And so that was a difficult thing. It's like I was kind of beaten up at the point. I had my Sharkworks back on the car with the valves disconnected. I'd gone back to that. And I think I'd bought another Sharkworks because I sold the original one. And so I was kind of beaten up and just said, fine, I'm just going to deal with it this way. Deal with the side mufflers, which are really heavy on the car. I'll stick with the stock headers and all of that. And so what they were touting at the time, which I also didn't believe, was that on the 991.1, that they could put headers on the car, go catless, and they didn't have a center section at the time, but we would use the factory center muffler and we wouldn't get a check engine light. And it would make, somewhere on the order of 40 horsepower. I was like, man, that's pretty incredible. All these other exhausts were making nothing, zero horsepower difference. You just had maybe a little bit lighter setup or something, but we always had problems with the valves and always had problems with drone. So I think that at the time, I think they were charging, somewhere around $8,000 or $9,000 for the headers, and I just said, you know what? They gave me a deal because I think I was maybe one, other than their local people, I was probably the third or fourth person to have the exhaust, the first real customer. So I think I bought it for like $5,500 or something like that. So it was the headers, the side muffler delete, and then we would adapt that or connect that to the factory, center muffler. And I got it, and the argument was, look, if we take the valves out, you get drone. And Jamie was adamant, look, the valve transition is not nearly as annoying. It's not going to become such a big problem for you anymore. So you go in, you hit the button, the PSE button, you turn it on, and the valves are open. Yes, they do close when you drive away, but then the transition is much smoother. It's not as pronounced. Plus, the car is louder anyway with the valves closed, so it's not as dramatic of a transition. So I didn't really believe that. I'm like, well, I think they promised me they'd buy it back from me or something like that, because it was hard to make anyway. And so I figured, well, look, this is no risk. I can sell my shark work if this works out, and get another $1,000 back or something. So I'd be $4,000 in, and I'm only losing $20,000 in this escapade. But the good news is that I started to gain some following. Now, I wasn't making any money in Obsessed Garage, so this was sort of unjustified, this pursuit I was taking on, but I couldn't help myself. So I put the exhaust on, and I was getting a check engine light. And so Jamie and Charles said, well, let's just some cars get it, some cars don't, just drive it more, and the check engine light never went off. So then I decided to do a tune. So we had tuning tech Frank Smith, who developed a tune for the headers. And so I then put the ECU, I had an ECU cloned. And so now another couple of grand into this deal, put the ECU in, went down to Titan's dyno, and made 55 horsepower at the wheels. It was insane. And that car would pull on what became the new RS, which was what rated like 25 more horsepower than the GT3. I would walk away from RSs. The car was exponentially faster. It was pretty incredible, really remarkable how much faster the car was with only a set of headers. Now, it was catless, and one of the problems that I found with catless is that the whole rear of the car would turn yellow. On the blue car, it really didn't matter that much. But the beauty of this is that I now found my exhaust. I found the system. It was amazing. Is amazing. And so then to add to the escapades of this exhaust saga, I finally decided I was going to make a trade. The 991.1 GT3 RSs had come out. I couldn't get an allocation. They were marking them up. I finally decided this is the only time in my life where I paid a markup on a car. I traded my Sapphire GT3 RS. I think I had 15,000 miles on it. My Sapphire Blue GT3 for a white .1 with 1,000 miles on it, and I had taken the exhaust off the car, taken the tune out of the car, started the car up, drove her on the driveway, everything was good. I didn't want to drive any more miles, shipped it to Columbus, Ohio. It gets to Ohio, the car freaks out. What I needed to do is go drive the car down the block for like an hour or so, and all the codes would have gone away. But the car had freaked out because it was used to seeing this, massive amount of flow, and it was used to the tune, and so we needed to ECU it to adapt. And so that dealer was trying to get out of the deal. They were backing out of the deal. And so it added a whole nother set of escapades to my endeavor here. So I got the white car home, we got the deal to go through, I got the dealer to fix the car. I actually sent that car to Esoteric, we did the PPF, they shipped it down to me. I put the headers and I put the side muffler delete on the RS. And it was amazing. Now, this is where my desire to go away from the catless version, that car actually didn't get any check engine light, so I was able to run the car without any tune, but the whole car turned yellow and it wouldn't come off. And I couldn't polish it off, I couldn't sand it off. The whole rear deck area turned yellow, and so it just wasn't really a viable option to have catless. Now, Dundon had continued to develop. They continued to develop the solution. They came out with a center muffler because what's happening is on the track, this now additional flow combined with the fact that the inlets, I think, are 2 3/4 on the bypass side of the stock center muffler. These were blowing up. They're exploding mufflers because under high heat in situations with, they spend a lot of time on the track. They developed a really ugly, but they developed a prototype for a lifetime center muffler, and they had the black version, which they now call the loud version, and then they had a quiet version. I forget what color they called that, but I decided to get the black version, the center muffler, which just made the exhaust that much better. It made the center section, which was titanium, stainless, it was quite a bit heavier, but much more substantial sounding, and now we had the absolute perfect exhaust note. So I was catless. I got the loud center muffler. I absolutely loved it. I then traded my .1 RS for a .2 RS. So when I traded the .1 car, it had the AWE, and then Dundon had done more development. The .2 cars, we couldn't really do catless without a check engine. And so they had developed a system where they made just as much horsepower, but had a 200 CEL cat. And so that's when I put loud center muffler, headers, catted, side muffler delete, and now we had the perfect exhaust solution. So that was on my .2 RS. So fast forward to today, there was no question which exhaust I was going to do on the 997. The 997 had a sole center bypass. Sounded nice, but you had that huge valve transition. We also weren't making particularly any power with that option, and so we do the Dundon version, and you get roughly 25 horsepower. I was thinking about doing the plenum, their intake, doing the tune. I just decided I didn't want to drop the engine in order to do the intake and plenum, and I felt like the car feels fast enough. So I decided not to do their stage 4 program. I also, it really needs to be put on the dyno and tuned there. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go through that process. I feel like the car has plenty of horsepower. So we gained 25 horsepower with the headers. We have an awesome cat, so we don't end up with any of the disadvantage of the cat. A loud center muffler. Dundon has since developed, so they have a crack pipe and a mini crack pipe, and the crack pipe is basically just a straight through exhaust, which is drone crazy, super loud. Just not my style. Even the crack pipe version, which is the basically deletes the center muffler and includes the side muffler delete and header, so there's no mufflers. It's just too droney for me, even though it's lighter and makes maybe a little bit more horsepower. I prefer to have the loud center muffler. So I'm telling you, if you're all interested in doing the exhaust, the street headers, side muffler delete is part of that package, valved, and then the loud series black center muffler. I am going to test, they have a titanium version of the center muffler. I'm testing that on that's what the box is behind me over here, for my 992 Touring. But my guess is I'm probably going to end up back to the stainless steel center muffler, because I don't think there's a better sound on earth than that setup. There's no drone, there's no negative. It's just all nasty when you want it to be, but the car is under control the rest of the time. Lots of loud outside the car. The car's loud when you're on it, but it's it's much more subdued. There's no boomy drone or anything like that with the setup. And so today, my first call with every Porsche, and it's a stinger because it costs a lot of money. I buy the exhausts, and so I call up, I text Jamie, and he puts my exhaust together and sends it out to me. So we knew with the 997 that we'd be doing the Dundon setup on this. I knew on my 992 I'd be doing the Dundon setup on this. It's an extremely expensive version. You're not so much paying for the shiny pipes that are welded together. In fact, it's not all that shiny. It's not all that pretty. They use 321 stainless, which isn't as pretty as 304 that's polished. There's lots and lots of other versions of exhausts out here, but they're the only ones, I'm telling you, they're the only ones that have put in the work, that have put in the effort, and then it has the expertise. There's since been other companies that have come out with headers that are basically a copy of their design, and they're still not quite there because there's some secret sauce that they're not showing everybody. And so it is truly, I believe, the best. They're not paying me to say this. I pay them to say this. But I'm glad that they're in business. My friend Larry Cosilla says this often. I've heard him say this often. You want you want the companies that you want to frequent to be in business. So it's important to me that they're in business. It's important to me that they have the resources to be able to continue to develop exhaust systems for Porsche, so we don't end up in a situation where a new car comes out and we're just stuck with the same old system that worked on the previous car, and we're missing out on potential for what our current cars would be. So hopefully, we can continue this. The EPA is after companies like Dundon and companies that do tuning for cars. I'm hoping that they can continue to fight the good fight, and we can continue, us car guys, continue to have these options available to us. But I'm excited to be trying out a new version with the titanium center section on my 992 GT3, and I'll be certain when I get my .1 RS again that I'm going to be calling them up first thing. Who knows, maybe I'll get a 992 RS at some point too, and a GT4 RS. That's the goal, is to get all those cars, and you better believe they'll have a Dundon exhaust on it. So I was hoping to tell you the story a little bit different, go back in time all the way to 2014, and it was just coming up on 10 years ago now. And it was, actually I guess it was 2015, so it's probably 8 years ago now. But it was a really big struggle in the beginning. Now I love it that I can just make the call, have the proper exhaust, make some horsepower, have an amazing sound, and really make the car sound like they look. That to me is really, really important. Makes it a much more fun experience. I'm telling you, there's nothing better than hearing a Dundon exhaust crack off the side of a rock wall in the mountains. There's very few things on this earth that I would rather hear and participate in. So anyway, go hit up Obsessed Garage, hit up my friends at Dundon, put the link in the description for their exhausts. Hit up Obsessed Garage if you want a chance to win this car. I don't know when you're going to watch this video, but if it's before July 31st, 2023, buy some stuff. You can buy the high torque tool for the wheels, get a bunch of entries, probably have yourself a 1 in 750 chance to win if you buy one of those. And we're going to be changing somebody's life with this car with a full Dundon exhaust on it. So anyway, thanks for listening to my story, and hopefully I won't have to do this kind of exhaust saga again. But I'm very particular about how things sound. I'm looking for a certain characteristic of a car, and unfortunately in the beginning I was a little too early. If I just waited a couple of years, I could have just called up Dundon and solved the problem from the get-go. But anyway, thanks for watching. As always, stay tuned for more crazy. The exhaust saga of the GT3 is, I guess, a very telling, or it's a microcosm. It's a good example of I guess who I am as a human in this unrelenting pursuit of functional excellence. And my friends at Dundon are an embodiment of that, functionally excellent pursuit. So thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.